Today marks the end of the second week of Paul Manafort's trial, and new signs in Bob Mueller's grand jury of an investigation that is circling Trump advisor Roger Stone. We can report tonight that a witness that Mueller wants to talk with is being held in contempt. That is Stone associate Andrew Miller. Now, his lawyers argue he shouldn't have to face the grand jury under these terms, so that's why he's in contempt. But it doesn't mean that Miller did anything wrong yet. His attorneys say they want to escalate this legal fight on purpose to get a wider hearing on the probe's legitimacy.
In order to appeal Judge Howell's decision challenging the constitutionality of the special counsel, you have to have a contempt order in order to go to the Court of Appeals. This case is likely to end up in the United States Supreme Court.
That is a fair game strategy, and we'll be watching if it gets to the court. Meanwhile, there is another Roger Stone associate, Kristen Davis, testifying in the same grand jury. Now, she was involved in a scandal that took down a New York governor.
Davis reportedly provided escorts to celebs and high-powered patrons who will remain a secret. Perhaps the most infamous of them all, disgraced former New York Governor Eliot Spitzer, otherwise known as Client Number 9, who resigned office after accusations of spending thousands of dollars per night with escorts, some of whom were Davis's best girls.
Now, that's what's in the public domain in terms of history. But again, to be clear, we don't know exactly what Mueller wants to learn from Davis. It does appear, though, that people around Roger Stone are going into the grand jury box. Meanwhile, that's not all. In the Paul Manafort trial, there was some mysterious happenings today. The judge stopping the trial for hours without explanation, that's unusual, and ordering jurors to, quote, keep an open mind, warning them not to discuss this case while it's open with anyone. I am joined by a reporter who has been all over these stories, NBC's Anna Schechter, and former federal prosecutor Seth Waxman. Anna, let's start with what we know and what we don't know, which, as I emphasize in this kind of case, is voluminous. But what do we know about the madam and the type of people that are headed into the grand jury?
Well, she is a very, very close friend of Roger Stone. They've worked together since 2010, but he's also godfather to her son. He could have told her any number of things, and it does look like this probe is wide-ranging. Sam Nunberg was on earlier today. He said they asked, when he went in and spoke to prosecutors, they were asking him for every single person that Roger Stone had ever worked with. So that is very broad, and Kristen Davis was in there for hours today. Now, she did handle his schedule, set up meetings. She did secretarial work for him. It's usually when she needed money, Roger Stone would create a job for her and have her as an assistant. But she says that Andrew Miller was the person who was handling Stone's schedule those several months before the election, that crucial time when WikiLeaks was releasing the DNC emails.
And so the possible inference from that is that Mueller wants to put in front of the grand jury people who can say where Roger was and when he was telling the truth about where he was.
That's exactly right. And she met with a prosecutor last week. It seemed like it was a real rush to get her in front of the grand jury, get her on the record just a week later. So there's a lot of energy here, a lot of movement. They are closing in.
Seth, what does that imply to you?
Yeah, I mean, it implies to me that Roger Stone should start thinking about what he looks like in an orange jumpsuit, you know? I mean, you got 5, 6, and 7 associates, close associates of Mr. Stone being pulled in front of a grand jury, people like his mentee, Sam Nunberg. You got his social media director. I'll tell you, the one that concerns me the most maybe is his driver. You know, Ari, if you ever get in trouble and the feds start pulling in your driver or your gardener or your plumber, they're digging that deep on you, you got to be really, really concerned about where you sit.
And the other piece to this is timing. Anna was just mentioning that it seemed like an urgent thing to get this material in front of the grand jury. That could be for reasons that are unrelated, because anything's possible, or it could be a desire to put material down on the record for a potential action, for a potential indictment. You add to that the fact that Randy Credico, who broke news on this show by describing how Mueller sent federal agents to New York to talk to him, and we broke the story again last night, advancing that he then was getting a subpoena. That seems to fit in because he is linked to Assange's Stone. Take a look at Credico on the beat this week.
We set up a conversation with somebody from the Mueller team, and they asked my lawyer if I would like to go down and do a voluntary interview, and he said no. There's a couple of reasons why they came to me, and I kept this under my hat for at least 6 weeks. I didn't want to talk about it because I don't want to instigate the special prosecutor.
He didn't want to instigate the special prosecutor, but we can confirm that he has now been subpoenaed with a date in September. We here in the beat have fact-checked that and obtained it. So when you look at that situation, does that tell you anything, and does that imply that any action on Stone could wait until after Credico goes in the grand jury, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I think they want to get all these material witnesses into the grand jury so they have the entire orbit of evidence, and then do whatever, bring whatever action they're going to bring against Mr. Stone, who, you know, by many accounts could be kind of the bag man for this Trump campaign. If it's true that they did, in fact, want that dirt during that Trump Tower meeting, and they, of course, have claimed that nothing came out of that. But remember that just 3 days after the Trump Tower meeting, Julian Assange went public and said he was going to release emails related to Hillary Clinton. You know, that's just 3 days. If Mr. Stone facilitated that or helped carry that out, you know, he would be a co-conspirator, an aider and abetter, and would be just as responsible as the principals who wanted that to happen.
And let me go to Anna finally on the other side of this, which is Seth talked about an orange jumpsuit, but we are a long way from conviction. We don't even have material that confirms where they're headed. Is it possible that they're being diligent prosecutors, but if they find that the entire story checks out, they don't have anything on Stone?
It's looking unlikely, but it is possible. Given the public statements that he made at the time that he was in touch with WikiLeaks, The Atlantic published a Twitter conversation between Roger Stone's Twitter feed and WikiLeaks' Twitter feed in October. It was clear that they had had conversations in the past. There's a lot there for them to be looking at, I'll say.
Let me say this. Our viewers know you to be a fair reporter, and the fact that faced with the on the other hand question, your answer is, well, that hand is getting smaller and smaller, so to speak. That likelihood is interesting.
To bring in 5 former employees, that's a lot of people.
It's telling. Yeah, and it's interesting legally. Anna Schechter and Seth Waxman, thank you both.